Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. And today I have a bit of an unusual one for you, as it's probably one of the stranger short stories that I've ever come across. And it is, of course, Short Story Tuesday, so why not talk about these strange short stories? Today's short story focuses on motherhood in a very, again, in a very unusual way. I am referring to The Cabbage-Patch Mother by Ludmilla Petrushevskaya, which was published in 2009 in her short story collection, There Once Lived a Woman Who Tried to Kill Her Neighbor's Baby. Very strange. Scary Fairy Tales, which was selected and translated by Keith Gesson and Anna Summers. For those who don't know, Ludmilla Petrushevskaya is a Russian author who's been writing since the 1980s. She is very well regarded in Russia, especially in playwright circles, as she's written a number of plays and won awards for her work, both in Russia and internationally. And what's interesting is she does have a couple of other short story collections that are titled exactly as strangely as this one, including one like There Once Was a Mother Who Loved their children until they moved back home, or something like that, which is very funny. But it does appear that she frequently talks about fairy tales in Russia, and themes of motherhood and womanhood and whatnot, which is fascinating. It's good to hear perspectives from around the world as it pertains to feminism. And I'm glad that I found this author, and even more glad that some people have translated this author that I had never heard before. Keith Gesson has done a lot of work with translating Russian works, and Anna Summers is a doctoral PhD student and appears to have done this for some PhD work, which is nice, like getting a little bit more experience there. So without further ado, let's talk about The Cabbage-Patch Mother. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Cabbage-Patch Mother focuses on an unnamed mother and her daughter Droplet. Droplet is an unusual child in that she is a cabbage baby of some sort, but like a very tiny not microscopic, but like you have to see the baby through a magnifying glass to get a full picture of this young daughter. And most daughters that the mother takes, or most doctors that the mother takes the Droplet to, refuse to deal with Droplet because she's not a fully grown human of some sort, but she manages to trick one doctor into looking at Droplet, and the doctor's like, oh yes, this is the child, they look pretty great, but please tell me more about yourself. And the mother reveals that she was like the father abandoned them, and that with another child she had sought to get an abortion. Clearly some unresolved issues going on with the mother in this story. The doctor recommends that they go seek out a hermit, which is lovely doctor advice. But when they do, the hermit pretty much calls the mother out on having this unresolved sort of BS in her life, and also accusing her of living in sin, specifically noting that like you learn to live in sin, now go the righteous path, presumably about the abortion or something like that. And the hermit advises her to go plant the baby in the ground and do not think about it or touch the baby again, which is, again, a very strange thing to do. So she wants the baby to be in proximity, though, so she plants Droplet in soil on her balcony, and then like she thinks about Droplet from time to time, but doesn't do anything about it. Presumably Droplet is getting water from the rain and everything. But after a long enough period of time, the mother hears a cat on the balcony and worries that Droplet might be eaten by the cat. And she goes out and she finds a larger baby. I think the baby's described as something of a giantess for some reason. And the mother is thrilled and decides to take care of the baby. And the baby even latches on to her breast, indicating a bond that is forming there. And as the story comes to a close, the narrator notes that the mother is still tending to the Cabbage Patch, which brings great joy and humor to the growing baby. In terms of analysis, what a very unusual kind of story here. It's kind of vague at times. Like many of the stories in this collection are kind of vague, and I'll talk a little bit about more in a few moments. But I think it adds to the attempt to tell stories through fairy tales. Much of this collection in general is divided into 4 parts: songs of the Eastern Slavs, allegories, requiems, and fairy tales. I think she's trying to pass down some cultural stories, some lore from Eastern Europe, which is fascinating to me, as someone who loves to learn a little bit more about the world. What Petrushevskaya is talking about here is motherhood, mostly though. The mother in the story, she's specifically named the mother and nothing else. Like she is becoming a mother in this story. And it seems like she's tried to avoid it in the past, which has something to do with being abandoned by her husband, by her baby daddy in this story. And the Cabbage Patch baby seems to represent the hopes and fears of the mother, maybe not forming a connection with the child, or a kind of guilt over what she's done in the past coming to bloom in the form of a cabbage, which is something that is one of the vegetables that is grown in Eastern Europe. That feels somewhat significant culturally speaking. But abortion also seems to be a major factor in this story. It does seem that Petrushevskaya, or at least the people in her story, are written in a way where they're condemning abortion. Specifically, when she goes to the hermit's like, "You lived in sin, now learn to live without," indicating that abortion is a sin, or maybe not, or like being abandoned by your husband. It's not exactly clear what Petrushevskaya is mad about, but she is kind of mad, so it does kind of feel like weird politics on abortion there. But there is an interesting quote that I would like to read to you. "I love my girl more than I love my life. It's so terrible to think she's going to return to the place she came from. As for my history, well, my husband left me when I was pregnant, and I didn't have the baby. I went to a doctor who referred me to a hospital, and there they killed my baby inside me. Now I pray for him. Maybe he's in that place in the land of dreams." And in the land of dreams is the place where the mother says that the Cabbage Patch baby frequently talks about, and Droplet even nods along to that. I think the land of dreams is the place of potentiality for when the figurative place of potentiality for when a fetus can become a fully grown human or something like that, but before you might abort it or something like that. And so you see some underlying fears and uncertainty and guilt that the mother is facing. I'm not quite sure what Ludmilla actually believes in regards to abortion, but for the mother in this story, abortion probably wasn't the right decision for her, and she feels guilty about it. And so for the hermit, I think in the story, and for the mother, there's an indication that planting this baby in the ground represents a commitment. That in doing so, and letting it flourish, you're no longer on the fence about it. You're this is actually going to happen. And so figuratively, you have to want this commitment to take place in order to be a mother. And then I think the biggest indicator that the motherhood is fully bloomed, that things are going to be good, is the breastfeeding that takes place, which is often an indicator of motherhood. I know a lot of mothers use the formula and whatnot, but there are still many who indicate that breastfeeding is a true sign of motherhood. And I'm not going to argue one way or another. That's another discussion entirely. But I do think that Ludmilla is indicating that motherhood has come to fruition in this grand act of breastfeeding. So Ludmilla is doing a pretty good job of exploring motherhood in this story in a way that I haven't really seen in many other stories yet. Petrushevskaya is also talking about allegory and magical realism in the story. Specifically, it's the story is not about a mother planting a child in the ground and it growing. She's talking about abortion specifically. She's talking about motherhood, as I noted before. And so this is a very clear example of allegory, and it's even clearer like in this entire collection as she deals with allegory and like there's even one part named allegories and fairy tales and things that aren't meant to be taken literally, but are more meant to look at the underlying messages and sort of themes that she's exploring there. And then the magical realism, of course, like the planting a baby in the ground, having to view a Cabbage-Patch child with a like a magnifying glass, and sort of your baby being plucked out of the ground in the form of a giantess. That's all pretty significant magical realism that kind of incorporates maybe what some aspects of Russian folklore, Russian culture with with elements of fantasy and fairy tales. So and like this story is not, again, not the singular instance of that, as Ludmilla talks about it in other places in here as well. As mentioned previously, I do think Ludmilla can be kind of vague with her fairy tales, not really committing to a singular sort of thing that she's trying to get at, not saying it in a specific way, but saying it in a more roundabout way, without offering any firm details like character names or sort of like an understanding of causality at times, because the stories just kind of seem to flow until they reach an end point, and you can kind of see what the plot elements of the story are, but that vague nature kind of makes it difficult to latch on to anything and really understand what she's getting at here. And part of that is probably, these are meant to be interpreted, that it's meant to be open like that. But I also think that at times it just, without firmly committing to anything, she ends up saying nothing real. That happens in many of these stories. This one's a bit more firmer, but a lot of these feel a little too loose, and it just it feels like nothing really sticks there. So I feel like that might be a problem for other people, in particular me as well. But for people who want something more solid and tangible, it might not hold up so well. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Cabbage-Patch Mother by Ludmilla Petrushevskaya. A pretty interesting short story from a very fascinating short story collection. I'm pretty much on the fence about it, with like it's either too vague or it's actually a pretty solid sort of fairy tale. And in general, whenever I encounter like fairy tales, I think it's very important to study those because they reveal a lot about the person telling them, but also the culture that they exist in, like what morality they're trying to express and what the cultures think is important and whatnot. So I guess in that way I kind of do recommend it, but it's probably not going to be anyone's like favorite short story collection out there, but it is still worth checking out if you can find it at your local library, which I did. This was a random checkout from my local library, which I'm very happy about, because sometimes you get bad stories, sometimes you get good, but sometimes you just find these weird, unusual ones that leave you thinking about it for a bit. And I'm sure as time passes, more thoughts will come, and I'll be like, oh, that was definitely deeper than I thought it would be. So if you have any thoughts on this, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear, and we can talk, about Russia or, these various types of fairy tale short stories. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or possibly join the Discord if you want to keep the conversation going about this author or the short story, or just Short Story Tuesday in general. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and motherly travels. Farewell.